Through the COVID pandemic, we've heard an awful lot of talk about mental health, our mental health, the community's mental health. We're catching up with someone who understands the tyranny and the challenges of mental health. His name is David Westgate and he joins us via Zoom. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, George. Thanks very much.
David, you've been on this amazing journey for the better part of 35 years. You've had to live with this. You've spoken on a number of occasions for the Black Dog Institute about the challenges and about the weight of expectations that can really challenge people. I've said time and time again, for those of us who don't have a problem, it's very hard to comprehend just how difficult life can be day to day, hour to hour, if you have a problem with your mental health.
I think it is. It's very difficult, and understandably, people who haven't been touched, I just don't think they can be as loving and caring as possible, but it's very hard to get your head around it unless you've actually been through it yourself.
Is it a case of we don't allow ourselves the time to ponder and think about the challenges, and we think it's all too hard, so we can't possibly get into the understanding of the support that one needs when they're seriously challenged by an episode?
I think that's to a degree. I also think I had a lovely thing from a Lifeline crisis support counsellor who said to me, when people listen to each other about these things, they listen very rationally, as like we are at the moment. But they said, when we sit down to a shift, we have an expression that we sit down to, and it's sit with the person's pain and hear their hurt. And I think that's a really difficult thing for people to do and takes a lot of training. And without that, it's very easy to hear what people are actually experiencing, but not really have a gut feel for it.
I'm wondering if they're afraid to get down and dirty. And when you allow yourself to open yourself up to those mood swings, let's put it that way, that can be confronting for people who don't want to go that far. Do you know what I mean? Let's go back for a moment. Let's go back for a moment. 35 years ago, for you and I to be talking about this in an open forum.
Forget it. We just simply wouldn't have been talking. I would have been drinking a cup of concrete and hardening up a bit.
Now, the world's changed. Our medical experts are now looking at it through a different lens. You have had to live it. You have this condition, it's bipolar 1, is that right?
Yes, bipolar 1, yeah.
So how does that manifest? Can you give me a glimpse?
Yeah, look, very briefly, bipolar 1 it is sometimes referred to as a roller coaster mental illness. It comes with suicidal lows, big periods of normality, but then it can be offset with quite amazing manic highs. Wow. And the best description I think I could give you for a manic high is it's a little bit like stepping aboard a Saturn V rocket. You take off, you're filled with energy, confidence, you just can't do any wrong. And like I could be popping out of bed at 3 a.m. in the morning feeling completely and utterly refreshed. It's quite amazing.
How did you, in all those years, manage to hold down a job, compete, challenge others, and do what you did? Because you've been doing this, as I said, for a lifetime.
Yeah, I have. And George, I think I was very fortunate in some ways, even though it's been a struggle. I've been hugely well supported by family, especially my wife. But also, I think to have worked in advertising. And I don't necessarily know I would have survived in many other careers. I don't think, for example, if I'd been a lawyer or a partner at KPMG or something like that, I don't think I could have survived because I simply wouldn't have had that ability to focus so well. Whereas in a creative industry, it's almost like a plus because it allows you, if you can fight through the depression,
Yep.
which I was reasonably good at it, and that's not to knock other people. I know there's people that suffer far worse than I ever have. But then the other side of it, the manic highs, I think, are actually quite productive for you to a degree.
Isn't that amazing? You've given this, you touched on beautifully the description of roller coaster, because Saturn V is a huge plus. We're not just talking a little rise. That's going through the stratosphere. So that's a huge surge. You would almost be able to touch Alexander the Great.
It is, and as I got older, I'm so well medicated now. I rarely would even go close to having a manic high. Plus, as you age, you get less of them. But what I did experience, I got to a point I could sense them coming on because it's a change of chemistry in your brain. It sounds weird, but you could almost hear the rush.
Wow.
You could almost sense this sound of things dramatically changing and quite rapidly too.
So you could almost feel the taps being turned on and the adrenaline charge would be preparing itself to make that in. So what did you do? How do you protect yourself, or how do you give yourself a little room to try and find some, what they call that ability to settle?
Well, nowadays, I mean, days gone by, I would just ride the Saturn V rocket, which seemed fine for a lot of people that are not in your close orbit, pardon the pun, but they see you as exciting, full of ideas, energy, whereas those really close to you, they suffer because you can be an arrogant, self-centered son of a bitch. You can't understand why, people aren't going along with your theories, and I had some amazing things the fact that my wife and I are still married after 37 years is huge testament to her.
Yeah.
And very little to me. And I don't say that to be immodest. That's proof.
I'm trying to understand, did you tell her? Did she know? Or did she discover that you had bipolar 1?
Well, George, my wife and I literally met at school.
Oh, wow.
About what used to be year 10.
Wow.
So I think she's lived through the whole thing. And I think she looks back and she says, I think I can see where it started to hit you in about your mid-20s. And I wasn't diagnosed till only 15 years ago when I was 48.
Wow.
But she could say, and she looks back now and she says, I can see particular times when I'm sure you were high. But it's funny, when you suffer from depression, when you suddenly go high, you think, oh, well, this is what happiness is. This is what everybody experiences. And you don't realize you're on a super happy high.
Wow. So what are the sorts of things we can do to assist people in our inner circle, maybe in our workspace, and so on, to help them? Because the last thing I want to do, I want to break down the mystique, I want to break down the stigma, if there is any. There shouldn't be. There shouldn't be any. Yeah. So how do we help one another?
I quite understand. People can be reluctant to talk should they fear that somebody's not travelling all that well.
Yep.
And they can be reluctant to, and I think very understandably, because they go, well, I'm not qualified to do this, or I'm going to say something politically incorrect. I'm going to put my foot in this. And when in actual fact, I think also people feel like if I talk to this person, I'll be obligated to fix them. And in reality, we're not qualified to fix people unless you're a psychologist or a GP or a psychiatrist. And I actually talk quite a bit on this and go, look, you don't need, all you need really is to observe somebody doesn't see, like George doesn't seem to be quite George at himself. He's normally full of life, and at the moment he's a bit quiet and withdrawn. So you can open up a conversation from that point of view. And basically, should that person actually open up to you, which is not all that common, I think, straight off the bat, But should somebody open up to you and say, well, actually, I'm feeling really bad, then all you really are doing is listening to them, giving them a chance to talk, a little bit of encouragement that this is quite prevalent and that this is very real for them. This is not an act of hypochondria or something.
No.
And that with the right help, this thing can be nipped in the bud. And I mean, when you talk to people, they go, I get it. Like, I never underestimate. I'd say, look, you might be, first couple of times, you might go, ooh, I don't know if I can handle this. But even if people do unload on you and go, here, this is what I'm going through, it's relatively simple, because I know it's human nature, especially for guys, I think, to go, if you've got a problem, I'm supposed to fix it for you. And in actual fact, this is not something, this is where we're simply offering support and hopefully encouraging that person to seek professional help.
Now, mental health first aid is something real, is it?
Oh, yes. Somebody had a very good idea 20 years ago and went, well, we've got physical first aid. Surely we should have mental health first aid. And I do a lot of training with that. And I think the majority of people who do it actually go, oh, this is great. I feel so much more comfortable and confident in able to be having a conversation. And they get a lot more knowledge, and suddenly it doesn't seem like that dark, mystic thing that we go, ooh, we best not approach.
You've opened a pathway here for discussion. I'm just wondering, if someone is listening and they're watching and they want to get involved and they want to find out a bit more about David Westgate, if they need some assistance, is there a pathway to get to David Westgate so you can assist and help? And again, because you and I could sit here and talk for hours, because I find you extraordinarily and wonderfully clear. You have a wonderful ability to cut through the maze and the language and give us a sense of some of the real challenges. And I have friends, and they're creative people. They're wonderfully creative. And I want to be an assistant. I want to be a supporter. I want to be a real friend. I don't want to cut them off because they don't quite have the same patience as I or others. So how can we do that? And how can we reach out to David Westgate should we be inclined?
The easiest way probably just is through LinkedIn. I'm constantly on LinkedIn. I do a lot of content regarding mental health. And I'm always happy, like anybody asks out for, contact details or whatever, more than happy to supply them.
Fantastic.
I say this slightly braggingly, but I've got a big following. I've got about 10,000 people. But from that point of view, I've learned so much by, being in contact with a lot of those people who are either psychologists or lived experience people themselves, and you learn so much about this. I find it so fascinating. But I'd be happy to give you my email or whatever, George. But the first and easiest thing, certainly just LinkedIn. David Westgate.
David Westgate, it's been a delight, a sheer joy to be able to cover some territory that, when I first started in the media 40 years ago, Sturm was the expression I kept hearing. We don't talk about things like that.
Absolutely.
So it's a real pleasure and an honour to catch up with you and to find out that there are people out there who actually do ride that Saturn rocket like very few others.
Thank you so much, George. It's been wonderful.
Talking mental health.
Thank you, mate.
And the challenges ahead. David Westgate on The Informer. If you want to know more, as he told you, reach out and catch him on LinkedIn. Thank you, David.